Hello and welcome to Managing IT for Shareholder Value. We are delighted to have you here today. My name is Sonika and I am your host. Your presenter is Sourabh Hajela, founder and executive editor of CioIndex. Hello, Sourabh.
Hi, Sonika. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
Before we start, Sourabh, I just wanted to take a moment to address some housekeeping issues. This webinar will last for 1 hour. Sourabh will present for about 45 minutes. The last 15 minutes will be spent answering questions from you all. Please note that the control panel is on the right side of your screen, which comprises of 3 panes and a grab tab. The first pane gives your details. The second pane is a quick reference guide about this webinar. The third allows you to submit any questions to me, your host. If there is a need for a broadcast message during this webinar, you will also be able to view it here. The Grab tab allows you to minimize the control panel to the side of your laptop. You can also download an attendee quick reference guide from our events page on CioIndex.com. In the event that you drop your connection, please dial back in. In the unlikely event that our connection is dropped, please wait 5 minutes and then dial back in. Make sure your microphone is on mute at all times. That's it for me. Over to you, Sourabh. Would you please share your screen?
Hi, thanks, Sonika. I hope you can see my screen now. Good morning, actually good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are here. I'm delighted to be speaking to you this morning. My name is Sourabh Hajela, and I am the executive editor of CioIndex. We're going to be talking about the big picture of IT this morning. Before we get into the thick of things, let me introduce myself. I have about 25 years of experience. Risen up the IT ranks from the very low to, through all the paces. I've been, an analyst, an enterprise architect, and then around 1993, I got into strategic consulting. And most recently, I was the head of e-business at ING and at Prudential. I've also held leadership positions at A.T. Kearney and Booz Allen, among the top-tier consulting firms that I've worked with. At Kearney, I led the team that developed the entire intellectual capital for A.T. Kearney, and I was also a member of the team that developed the IT strategy core competency for Booz Allen. There's a lot of debate in IT circles and outside on IT strategy, business IT alignment. There are different names we give to it. There are people on all sides of the aisle. Some people are diehards who want IT to quantify its return on investment. Some others say, how can IT quantify returns on investment? And we're not going to be able to, settle that debate anytime soon. It's interesting. But what I'm planning on doing today is to lay the groundwork for us to have a meaningful discussion around IT. And meaning in my mind is where you can make better decisions about IT, your IT investments, your IT projects. And the best way to lay the groundwork for such a discussion is to, A, cut through this jargon and the hype surrounding this issue. The second thing is to lay some meaningful words and terms and define them so when we have a discussion we can actually understand each other and see what it is that we are referring to. So you'll see this discussion go from dollars and cents, which is what the business typically values, to bits and bytes, which is where we all exist. Now, obviously, most people in business are focused on certain elements. We're going to talk about those, and most people in IT are focused on certain elements, so we're going to talk about those. But the journey has to begin from where the business is going to create value to how IT is going to enable that value. We'll talk about IT capability, what are its components. We're going to talk about how business strategy drives IT strategy, or maybe IT capability connects to business capability. We're going to see how this whole discussion around alignment, and now a lot of people are talking about fusion. What is that all about? We're going to see how IT capability can create, the term that people use is the biggest bang for the IT buck, or maximize IT ROI. We're going to see what that's all about. So let's begin. I insist on calling everybody in IT a business executive because, quite frankly, if you are not in the business of business, then you are interesting but not pertinent to the organization. As a business executive, the primary goal that you focus on, no matter what your rank, title, serial number is on creating shareholder value. And information technology is a means to an end. It's a tool that enables the creation of business value. What people understand is that IT is needed. Some people consider IT to be a necessary evil, but everybody recognizes IT is needed. The question is, what kind of IT capability needs to be created, how and where that IT needs to get engaged and involved, and how do you create the maximum value using your information technology capability. This webinar is the first step you're going to take towards understanding and leveraging IT to maximize shareholder value. Now, these are terms that I'm using very carefully because I want to focus on value. I want to focus on value that is critical to stakeholders of any organization, whether it's a government organization, whether it's a commercial organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, doesn't matter. This is your high-level map for the rest of the journey for this webinar. Dollars and cents are to the top left-hand corner, right next to shareholder value, and bits and bytes are to the bottom right, next to the IT capability. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is connect bits and bytes to dollars and cents, or dollar and cents, if I may. The essential function of any business, and any business that wants to sustain over time, and again, when I say business, I'm including government and nonprofits because everybody has key stakeholders. And those key stakeholders have put you in business to do certain things, to meet certain objectives which they set. So if you understand value, let's stick to that one-term value and not get hung up on shareholder value versus the general good, or what does the government do, which has got anything to do with shareholder value. A government that does not generate value is not in business for a very long time, as we've seen around the world over the centuries that the history has been written and read. The journey from shareholder value, the desire to create shareholder value, starts with a business model. Any organization that exists out there and has existed and wants to sustain itself over time must have a differentiated business model. Otherwise, it'll fail sooner or later. A business model, and we'll talk a little bit more and in depth about business model. This subject in and of itself can take on volumes, but I'm going to give you a very high level 50,000 foot view of a business model. And most IT strategy discussions, for some reason, miss business model and dive straight into business strategy. And I'll differentiate these two and show you why business model is the most critical thing that an IT strategist must focus on. A business's capability, a business capability, supports business model. So in other words, you're trying to define and articulate what is my objective, why do I exist, why am I in business. Business drivers, a lot of people have given them different names. They're related, connected, and yet differentiated, but I'm going to call them business drivers. You can call them critical success factors. You can call them key performance needs. You can call them business requirements. They're all one and the same thing, trying to achieve what must I do to achieve my objectives. These business drivers in turn convert and drive implications for the entire organization, not just for information technology. And when you connect them to IT's inherent capabilities, now you are transferring the shareholder value, shareholder-driven business model requirements onto information technology. And IT capability is the sum total of what you possess, your ability to deliver something. That system solutions, bits and bytes are to the right of this capability that together comprise IT capability and give you the means to meet the implications. And let's dive into the first concept, which is business model. there's a very good definition of business models done by Osterwalder, and I would encourage you to search that on CioIndex, and you'll find a bunch of stuff on the Osterwalder business model. I have, as a force of habit, come up with my own definition, which is much simpler and, to me, much more meaningful, because I like to think of things in a very simple way. Otherwise, I find that it's very difficult to act on stuff that I don't understand. There are three critical components of a business model. One is differentiated value. That is something you create by virtue of being, who you are, what you do, what you know, how you do it. The second element is how is it that you identify and approach and, quite frankly, pounce on market opportunity. And the third element is value exchange. So if you look at the first element, it comprises of two things. One is what you possess, your core competencies. What are you good at? Some people are good at some things and some others at some other things. If you look at car companies, perhaps Mercedes is very good at manufacturing high-quality engineering-driven cars, and perhaps Hyundai is very good at delivering quality at a very low price. These core competencies are built, these core competencies are acquired, these core competencies are the basis of your competitive posture, but they are in and of themselves not sufficient for you to create business value. Core competencies are complemented by external relationships. What you don't possess, you acquire. Where you cannot acquire, you partner. So you find ways to plug holes in your core competencies. By definition, core competencies are not everything that you possess. They are the essence of the most important qualities and qualifications that you must possess in order to be in business over time, not at a point in time. Some companies, and let me give you, since we are on cars, let me give you an example of Chrysler. They introduced the whole minivan segment. That was a market opportunity created by Chrysler. They made money because they were able to identify that segment. Otherwise, an automobile is just sort of a set of wheels and a frame, but Chrysler turned that first into a minivan and then the crossover vehicle. If you follow the car industry at all, you understand how Chrysler had the same core competencies, or let's just say they could do the same thing that a General Motors could do, but Chrysler created a whole segment by seizing that market opportunity and making a lot of money through it. But just the fact that you possess core competencies, that you have relationships, that you have identified a market opportunity is not sufficient for you to say, I have a business model, because a business model cannot be converted into real value unless there is a means of value exchange. So when you look at certain car companies that give you a car for dollars, that's one way of value exchange. There are certain other car companies that introduce leasing models. There are certain others that introduce other pricing and packaging and unpackaging models that give them a means of connecting with their customer so that the customer can exchange whatever value they possess for the good or product that you're trying to sell to them. So these three elements comprise a business model. Most organizations, when they talk about ROI, most of them are talking about, hey, what is IT's ROI? Very few people have ever spoken to me about HR's ROI or accounting's ROI. Forget marketing's ROI. If you were to ask anybody in an organization, what is your business model? I think most people will give you generic models. Oh, we have a media model, or we are in publishing. Now, if two publishers are doing the same exact thing, that is, they have the same exact business model, they will not be in business for long, because one or the other is going to beat them or acquire them, because by definition, if two organizations in the same market have an exactly same business model, then they are in a commodity market, and then pricing is going to drive the agenda, and one of the other, usually the one with more firepower, is going to overpower the other one. So by definition, every single organization in this universe has a differentiated business model. This is a critical aspect, and that is why I believe that this is the core, the center, the anchor of any strategy, business, or IT. Now, I want to break down business model into its elements. And the best way to understand how is business strategy driven, or what's the connection, I'm going to stay away from all of these strategic terminologies and business model terminologies and think in terms of what is it that one can do to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. I've just listed a few of these elements. There are many more, and each one of these elements has many, many more subcategories. So if you look at differentiation, if you look at how is it that I'm going to create a distinct footprint in the marketplace, then you've got to start to think in terms of, am I going to address the whole market? Am I going to be a Walmart? Or am I going to be a very small niche player that I'm going to hit that niche and be really good at it? So, Fendi, for example. You can distinguish based upon product. You can distinguish based upon packaging, bundling and unbundling, pricing is one component of that bundling, unbundling. You can compete on quality. So these elements are what give you, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, and I want to emphasize that I'm just trying to illustrate the different levers of competitive advantage that are at the disposal of a business, and these levers of competitive advantage give you the distinctive business model that you eventually settle on which you're going to compete. So if you were to pick a few, and I've just highlighted product, quality, and service, for example, then you are competing on them and their subcategories. That's what establishes your survival long term. You have bet the farm on these four elements that the customers identify, the customers want, the customers need these elements, and they're going to pay for you to realize value for your shareholders. That's basically the bottom line. And at any given point in time, if you have a competitor who has an exact same focus, exact same approach to the market, that's the point at which you either change or you say that I'm going to now compete head-to-head with this person, trying to make it better and better along this category, and then now you have a fight on your hands. Having given you just a brief overview, and there's, like I said, reams of information that you can find on business models and go into, analyses and examples, but please focus on the business model, not per se on business strategy, to drive your IT strategy. Now, given the business model, I'm going to walk through the journey that the business model, definition of the business model, takes to IT capability. Sonika, would you please push the first poll? So we're going to take a minute to just respond to this poll, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the journey from business to IT. I think we can close it now, Sonal. Terrific. Business model-driven business requirements must be converted into something tangible for IT to see and act on. And the journey takes the form of creating an IT vision. That is, what are the imperatives for IT driven by that IT vision, and then designing and implementing an IT capability to meet those imperatives. So the journey, if you look, I'm drawing a parallel between everything that happens on the business side of the aisle with everything that must happen on the IT side of the aisle. If there is a business model, there must be an IT model. And think of it this way, that no two IT organizations are the same. Two IT organizations can be the same and still survive for the simple reason that IT doesn't ever hit the marketplace. So two IT organizations can survive having the same exact footprint because they're internal and they are not subject to market forces. Otherwise, the same thing that applies to a business will apply to IT, which is you will not be in business for a very long time. But thankfully, IT organizations are internal, so that can carry on. Once you create your IT footprint, now you've established that you have this specific IT capability to execute on. Certain IT organizations are very good at building things. Certain others are very good at service after the fact. Certain other organizations are very nimble. They turn things around very fast. You have, and I'm going to equate business model with your fundamental DNA. You know who you are, and as a matter of fact, each person brings a certain thing to the table, and if one were to go crazy and take this concept to its limit, you could say each person has a specific business model. So, as a president famously said, I don't do that vision thing. I think any IT organization that doesn't do that vision thing would not be productive. You would be in business because, like I said, you're internal, but you will not be productive. You would not be meaningful. You wouldn't amount to, you would not create enough value for the CIO or the head of the IT organization to find a seat at the table, which is what most CIOs covet, is to be taken seriously. And the whole discussion around the CIO not being an IT head, but being a business leader. You know, a lot of discussion is happening around that, but nobody really defines what does that mean. Well, that means is that you now think of yourself as the CEO of this internal company and start to act and behave in a manner, even though your hands are tied behind your back because you cannot create product that you want. You have to create products that your market is asking for. You cannot discontinue products like any business can do. Nevertheless, you must put on that hat that says, I have a business model, I have a fundamental capability, I have things that define me just like any business is defined, and I'm going to operate in that manner, even though I'm not selling goods and services and not creating real dollars. Let me think in terms of blue dollars. So getting back once again to this whole issue of what exactly is capability. We use this term really loosely. What do we mean when we say capability? So I've come up with a definition in simple terms, as simple as we can get given the situation, to understand what is it that we mean by capability. There are four critical elements of business capability, and you'll notice in a few slides that these are the same four elements of IT capability. The first one is strategy. Strategy in very simple terms is how do you plan on getting from point A to point B. If you are on a specific journey, let's just say you have a specific business model and now you want to change that business model, whether you want to tweak it or have a fundamental change, you're going to have to come up with a strategy of how you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be. Processes are what you do, specific things that you do to get from point A to point B. Organization is the people power that aligns, so structure, skills, that align with what is the objective, that align with the specific path that you've chosen, specific strategy / plan, and then the process that you set in place, people align against it, and then the fourth element is information technology. So you'll see that information technology, in my worldview, is an absolutely critical element. I could have called it infrastructure, I could have called it a whole bunch of things, but I'm just, for this discussion, highlighting the fundamental building block of business capability is information technology. Now, if one were to look at this picture and have this discussion on alignment, you'll notice two things. One is that if you are aligning IT strategy to business strategy, then you will always be behind. You will never be in alignment. And here's the reason. The one factor that determines alignment is timing. So let's just say today you decided to change the fundamental direction of your business, and quite frankly, most businesses don't fundamentally change direction, they adapt. Business cycles, environmental factors force you to think in terms of changing direction, and when you do, one of the critical elements that comes to play is information technology. Information technology cannot turn on a dime. So it'll take some time to change IT capability, and therein lies the rub, because by the time you've changed IT capability, the business environment has changed and now new factors emerge. So you'll see that a fundamental disconnect between this notion of IT alignment, business strategy, IT alignment is that you will never be in alignment. You will always try to get in alignment. That's the first thing that one must understand. And hence, people have started to talk about fusion, which is basically how do you fuse business with IT. So we're no longer talking and trying to play catch up all the time. We're basically trying to make sure that fast, quick change in the business environment is met with fast, furious change from IT. So you are almost in the game, not trying to play catch up all the time. So this is the whole debate around business and IT alignment, trying to simplify that somewhat in this discussion. You may have all heard about value systems and value chains, and I just tried to break it down into simpler terms to understand the business ecosystem. I understand customers, competitors, suppliers, and employees, and the big box there is trying to highlight the critical elements, the critical functions, the critical processes that happen within the business. You have sales and marketing, product development, I'm just calling it planning. Different organizations have different plan for product development. I'm just trying to identify the integrated product development focus here. The three rows will gain meaning as we look at different types of processes, because this is absolutely critical. If you want to manage something, you ought to understand that a process is not a process. There are three fundamentally different types of processes. But there is a reason why I laid out what the general business world understands as the value chain in these simple terms. As we look at our organization, one has to understand that at every step, at every process, at every connection, there are factors that affect shareholder value. Now, take product development, for example. The main focus and function of product development is to quickly, cost-effectively come up with a product offering. And a product offering is not just a good that you manufacture. It has all the elements of marketability. You produce a toaster, you're going to lose. You produce a toaster with the values and virtues that your customer is looking for, you're going to win. So it's not just the product, but the bundling, the pricing, every single thing goes into that product decision. As IT people, as business IT folks, we need to understand what comprises, what creates value, what creates the specific value at that particular point in our environment if we are going to be successful in meeting those requirements. And talking to people from that realm, we need to understand this. Similarly, IT is not a bunch of bits and bytes. It's not systems. It's not solutions. It's not infrastructure. It is something that enables you to do something. So it's a tool that enables you to do something. So I call them IT enablers. IT can help you position vis-a-vis competitors. So if you think of all the IT systems that you use in, and I'm just going to call it marketing to simplify this discussion, in essence, what IT is doing is helping you in positioning. If you think of all the supply chain systems that you use, IT is helping you in integration and visibility. If you think of all of the systems, CRM, for example, that you're using to interact with your customer, it's enabling you to build a relationship. All your vendor relationship management is driven by collaboration, so every single system, every single bit and byte that you design is toward enabling the success of something in some process or some function in the business or some connection point in the business. I've called them IT enablers. This is a very deep discussion. I've just tried to boil it down and give you the essence of that discussion. We're trying to finish something in 45 minutes, so I hope you understand. The connection, the alignment, the business IT fusion, if whatever we want to call it, happens when you can connect specific IT enablers with business imperatives. That is where IT strategy meets business strategy. That is where IT model meets business model. That is where all of this IT strategy realm is realized. On the left is your business model / business capability, driving business imperatives. On the right is IT capability, driving IT enablers. And when IT enablers enable a specific business imperative is the point where we have created real value using IT. Given this example, to start to talk in terms of applications, as you may have noticed that we have taken a journey from 50,000 foot, we're trying to bring it down to about 30,000 feet in this discussion. So if you were to look at each one of these systems, each one of the systems is meeting some business requirement, it's meeting some business imperative along two dimensions. I haven't mentioned the third one. I'll mention that in just a second, which is risk. So if you look at a business's most fundamental requirements, you can bucket them into three major buckets. One of them is you are focused on revenue. So that is the first requirement. The second focus is cost, whether you want to minimize cost or you want to eliminate cost from a certain element. That is a second thing that your business requirement bucket, if I may. And the third one is risk. We're going to talk about risk in a second. So this is the connection between an IT initiative, an IT system, an IT infrastructure element with shareholder value. Sonika, if you don't mind, would you please push the poll results?
Sure. Well, as you can see, we had over 100 people respond. There was only 86% of the attendees who voted, and 40% of them say that there is clearly an articulated and documented business strategy in the organization. 43% say there is one but not documented. About 12% do not have a business strategy, and 5% are not sure.
So the good news here is that, I'm kind of surprised with 40% articulated, which is a very, very good number. So you're all very fortunate that you can now devise IT strategies that align with that business strategy. The key issue whenever there is a requirement put on IT to create a business strategy, well, you don't have a business strategy or that you don't deliver enough value, most CIOs don't push back and ask for a business strategy. And if 60% of you believe, so let's just say 50% of you believe that there is no articulated, whether it's documented or not, business strategy, then quite frankly, now you're a mind reader who's trying to see what it is that you can do to be of value. So this is a critical point that I think every CIO should keep in mind and be ready for that IT ROI discussion. Sonika, would you please push the second poll, and then we'll dive deeper into the next. Please take a minute to respond to this. All right, I think we can close it now. So far we've spoken about business models, their connection with business imperatives and IT capability. As you'll notice, I've tried to draw a parallel between a business model, a business capability now, and IT capability. So if you look at the parallel here, IT strategy is equivalent to business strategy, IT processes are equivalent to business processes, IT organization to business organization, and IT infrastructure is now taking the place of what I had called IT, but it's a fundamental infrastructure of business. The same thing that applies to business applies to IT. You are creating products and services. You are taking a certain time to market. You manufacture those products and services at a certain cost, quality, and risk. You, the internal IT organization, is subject to the same rules that the business is, with some key differences. For example, obviously, you're not selling your products. Obviously, you don't determine what products to manufacture, and hence this whole idea of creating an internal business is kind of falls flat, because you cannot make certain critical decisions that a CEO can make. I can, as somebody who is running a business, I can make certain critical decisions about products that are unprofitable. I can discontinue them, but you, the CIO, or somebody who works in the IT organization, cannot say, I'm not going to work on this application because we're losing money. That just cannot happen. Or it can happen, but you'll be working somewhere else. So the thing that one needs to understand is there is a parallel to a point. If you are in the business of creating strategic capability, if you're in the business of creating strategic IT, if you're in the business of running IT as a business, then this is one of the most critical things that you should get your arms around. Whatever terminology suits you, please, by all means, use that. But this is what I consider to be IT capability, to create strategy-driven solutions. And if you go back a few minutes, and that connection between IT capability and business capability is now what is connecting you to the source of value, which is the business model. The other confusion that comes sometimes is in discussing processes. And the fundamental confusion that comes from discussing processes is this whole issue of, well, what does what do, or what's the business case for anything. The business case for anything that you do, whether in IT or in business or wherever it is that you're creating a business case, has to have three elements. And these are three core elements. You can come up with a fourth one, but I'm going to stick to the major ones. The three major elements of any business case that you create are revenue / how much money you're going to make me. 2, cost, how much is it going to cost me. And 3rd, what risk do I stand of you not delivering on time, or you not delivering on budget. So anytime anybody asks you for a business case, that is basically where you are coming up with answers. Now this, as it so happens, is really not something that somebody came up with pulled out of thin air. This has a fundamental basis in process, because you are essentially converting process into automation. There are 3 fundamental types of processes. One are innovation stream, the other one is delivery or implementation stream, and the third one is management and control. Each one of these processes does something. Innovation stream process takes a concept, creates a product. Delivery stream processes takes that product and gets it to the customer. And management and control, what we call governance, whether it's corporate governance or IT governance or any type of management and control, we are referring to the control processes, which is you are now trying to make sure that you are not on a runaway train. You're trying to make sure that the promise of IT strategy is being delivered, or has a very good chance of delivery. So when people talk about IT governance, people talk about IT strategy and the relationship, the connection lies in the process. The connection lies in the process, and the connection goes all the way to the business case, because you now can see clearly what is doing what role they are playing in this overall picture. Again, I want to say that we tend to complicate things by saying, well, does it really apply to government, or does it really apply to for-profit versus non-profit? Please stop and think. These are fundamental processes that apply across organization. I don't care whether it's a government organization or a profit, non-profit. These are fundamental processes that apply across the board. The name product could be a misnomer. We can call it a service, or we can give it more definition for a nonprofit. The element revenue can be a misnomer in a not-for-profit, but there is value that you're creating that you can quantify, which is the other thing that a lot of people say, well, how do I quantify this? There are means of quantifying stuff, but when people insist on those means being dollars and cents, that is where the problem arises. Quantification in and of itself is not a problem. And quantification, if we really, and this is, I'm digressing here a little bit, quantification, when you think about quantification, it's for you to make a decision, not for you to present to somebody saying, okay, this is the amount of value I'm going to create, because most of these numbers, me, having been around for 25 plus years, I would just discount, because quite frankly, I've never seen a number anybody has been able to meet after, the battle really begins. Sonika, would you please push the second poll results? I'm running a little late.
Well, this time we had a higher rate of response. The people who think that IT strategy is important, 62% of the respondents think it is important. 83% believe that, how else would you do business if you didn't have IT strategy? Nobody believes that it's a waste of time, and nobody doesn't know if it's important or not. So 26% say that yes, but delivery is more important than strategy. So execution and delivery seem to be on top on their list.
Fantastic. I think this is very heartening. Sonia, would you please push the third poll while I just. I think this is really good to know that we have agreement that IT strategy is an absolutely critical element of an IT organization's processes, survival. I think in the past, a lot of people have either focused on punditry around IT strategy. They made it out to be some esoteric thing that nobody will really understand, and I'm the only one who does it. To others who said, and I quote, who needs IT strategy? The last thing you need is IT strategy when we have so much work to do. Well, chasing one's tail is a lot of work, but I'm not sure if it has meaning or if it produces results. So one is better served by having a strategy and a plan than to just show up to work and say, what shall I do today? So I'm really glad that people see the value, and not surprising in this audience on an IT Strategy 101 webinar.
Saurabh, I would certainly urge you to, we are running behind schedule. I've extended the webinar slightly, but if you could please, keep a close eye on the clock.
Absolutely. All right, so I think I'm going to walk through real quickly this IT strategy process. You may have read the 7 Steps to IT Strategy article that I wrote, but if you haven't, you can search on CioIndex and you'll find it there. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm laying this journey from business, shareholder value, all the way down to creating those specific initiatives and a plan around them in migration. I'm not going to take a lot of time going through this, but you'll see the critical portion which I want to talk next is enterprise architecture planning. Now this is one realm, this is one field that in my opinion has received the least amount of attention from CIOs and organizations that I've been in. There's a lot of lip service paid to enterprise architecture planning, but quite frankly I've seen very few organizations that have actually shown a real keen interest in using this tool, using this technique, whatever you want to call it, field, to its fullest extent and giving it the place that it really truly deserves in the IT ecosystem. And in my worldview, the one thing that differentiates a CIO from any other business leader is their grasp of this concept, because this is the place where literally you convert your conceptual into implementation, and literally the rubber meets the road. If you look at your journey so far, that journey can be translated along 3 vertical layers. Business to technology journey takes place through enterprise architecture. The first place where this battle begins really in the technology realm is in enterprise architecture. You have conceptually defined what it is that you want to do. Enterprise architecture converts that into meaningful IT solutions. You identify the need, identify a solution, and take it all the way down to how the different components of IT capability are going to merge together to create this value. Enterprise architecture makes sure that you are creating the value against the promise. Enterprise architecture makes sure that you're doing it at the least possible cost, because there's no duplication and there is no mishmash of things that are at loggerheads with each other. So everything works together, everything works without friction, everything works in the most cost-effective way, no duplication. This is the place, and if you have a building permit process in your organization, I would say, and I've devised them and I've seen them, I have not seen one that works the way it should work, and there are many reasons for that, but I would just urge you to take another look at your building permit process, because anytime your organization is receiving any flack for not delivering on time, on budget, or not delivering value, this is the fundamental place where you can stem that tide. Again, I've tried to represent both those vertical and horizontal layers here, trying to make a clear case for enterprise architecture planning. There's nothing more to say here at this stage other than to say that one needs to understand that your journey from dollars and cents to bits and bytes must pass through enterprise architecture and the layers of the enterprise architecture. I've done 3. People tend to do 4 or 5. Quite frankly, any which way you can define your fundamental building blocks of the organization should be okay for most people, most reasonable people. One thing that I wanted to touch upon is the other element of IT capability, which is organization. So we all know there are 3 different types of organizations. There is a very centralized organization where there's a centralized CIO, head of IT, all IT resources, structure, skills, everything belongs there, to a decentralized, shadow IT organization, whatever you want to call it, business unit IT. Even at functional levels, I've seen in large brokerages, for example, you'll notice typically that there are a few IT people, for example, in research that are aligned directly to that organization, and there are hybrids, everything in between. The key thing, and again, I'm running really short on time, so I can't really dive into this. The key thing to understand is that these 3 come with their own sets of levers of advantage. You must take a look at your overall business strategy. You must take a look at the business imperatives, and then design the IT organization to meet the implications that those business imperatives have put on IT. Another place where I want to spend a minute is understanding all of these different things that we tend to call strategy. We need to understand the difference between system strategy, enterprise architecture, IT strategy, governance. So as you can see, the place where the connection happens is system strategy, because this is the place for the first time you're making the fundamental decision about specific IT solutions, whether you're going to build them, you're going to buy them. You're going to specifically build what and how is happening at this stage of the game. And again, reams have been written about this. There's a lot of discussion that can happen just on this topic. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to stop at that. Now, I want to give you a few examples of the connection that I first laid out a picture of the business. Then I laid out where is it that businesses typically have need requirements. Then I laid out how IT enablers basically meet those requirements. And this is the picture of IT that emerges as a result of all of these things coming together. So if you look at enterprise resource planning systems, for example, you can see clearly that they are now occupying just about, depending upon the package that you pick, all of the key processes of an organization. And now you can connect this to say, okay, what's specific, and I should have put this in the diagram, I'm going to do that the next time I do this, is the specific enablers of enterprise resource planning systems and the specific business requirements that they meet, again, at the high level that we are discussing this. Another way to connect IT systems with a business model, supply chain management. Again, the same formula applies here. You can see that the supply chain system is occupying is automating certain processes, providing certain IT enablers. Those IT enablers connect with business requirements to create the business value and make the connection between shareholder value and IT capability. The same thing holds true for customer relationship management. As I said, the key enabler there is your ability to connect with your customers to get their requirements and forge a relationship. Same thing for EDI and the whole realm of connecting organizations. So now your organizational boundary has actually extended. So if you look at these two boxes, you could literally draw a bigger circle around this, and all the various connections that you have to make in order to enable a business model are under this realm. And then, as you can see, this has its own set of business requirements and IT enablers that are going to meet that business requirement. The internet has somewhat changed, and in my opinion, this was not the first time, but let's just talk about it as if this was the first time it was done, that for the longest time, IT was taken as an enabler. The internet changed it because for the first time, a technology drove the business agenda. And that is where most people woke up to the idea that, hey, technology is not to be thought of in terms of alignment, because if you think of technology as only in terms of alignment, then you would have missed this entire internet thing like most corporations did and are still playing catch up. The next thing that has happened that has forced people to think about technology driving the agenda is social media, social networking. That is fundamentally changing the way you do business. It's got nothing to do with the technology of social networking or social media. And so those are some of the simplest sites that you could come up with. But the whole idea of people crossing boundaries and being able to talk to each other, whether it's a conversation about your brand or your product, it's a completely, totally different realm of business, and organizations are still struggling with it and think that creating a page on Facebook is their social media strategy. And those are the organizations that are going to play catch up and lose out to people. For example, Amazon has done to Barnes & Noble what a lot of the social media is going to do to a lot of organizations. Well, I have run through stuff. I want to give you a preview to what's coming next. I'll be talking about, I promised 7 different skills. I've just laid out 6. There is a 7th one, which is leadership, which is coming. I just wanted to bring to your attention that every 2 weeks we are planning on holding a webinar on the other skills. I'm going to go dive deeper into IT strategy. I didn't want to dive into IT strategy at this stage because I wanted to lay the groundwork for it at this webinar. So IT strategy is coming next, and we're going to talk about the specifics of IT ROI and value creation, because those are also critical elements that we tend to really complicate and really not that complicated. So, Sonika, would you please push the poll results?
Well, this poll, we had a lower response. The response was only 61%, and I think the reason for that was a lot of people got confused thinking that this question was the first one that had been asked. I did respond to those questions saying that this was specifically to ID strategy, whereas the first one was, whether your organization has a business strategy or not. So given that the response was lower, if Sourabh, you want to just speak to the difference between the 2 questions, that would be great. The results are, 30% said that yes, there is a clearly articulated and documented IT strategy. 43% said that we do have one, but it's not documented, and 23% of the respondents believe that their organization does not have an IT strategy. 3% are not sure if they do or don't.
So all I can say at this point is, imagine being on a flight where the pilot does not have a flight plan. So those of you who think they have an IT strategy which has not been articulated, now imagine being a passenger, which is, if you're the CIO, imagine your staff. I've led teams of hundreds of people, and I could not imagine a day where somebody who's a programmer who's trying to do their stuff does not understand what I was thinking at a given point in time, because it's the key communication that goes from me to every single member of my team. I would urge you, if you're in that majority which does not have a clearly articulated and documented and communicated IT strategy, then please remember one thing: just the fact that you don't have something articulated doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because by definition everybody has an IT strategy. You have now surrendered your agenda to people's imaginations, and that may be a good thing in normal circumstance, but now you are the leader, the captain of the ship, and your staff, your crew does not know what you're thinking. So I think with this, Sonika, I'm going to end my presentation here. If there are questions, I'd be more than happy to respond to them. And just finishing off, you can send me an in-message on CioIndex. My handle is Sourabh Hajela, one word. I'm happy to respond to any questions and comments that you have there as well. Sonika, all yours.
We did receive a lot of questions. Given we are short on time, I will ask you a few. The most basic one that I got, which I got from a few people, wanting to know what would you say is a good IT strategy?
I think a good IT strategy is one that produces results, and the only measure of any strategy is the results that come out of that strategy. You can look at something and say whether that thing is going to produce results or not. So the measures of things that I look for are very simply a plan of action, a plan of change, and a business case which says the rationale behind that decision. So those are the three elements I look for, but eventually a good strategy is only determined by the results.
Thank you, Sourabh. Another question that was asked was, how often should an IT strategy be done? And I'll combine it with one that said, who should be involved in the IT strategy formulation?
I think there is no set timetable for an IT strategy. IT strategy is a process that happens continuously. You don't create a strategy and put it on a shelf someplace. This is a working document. This is an operational document. So it's a continuous process, and it should be undertaken seriously, where you fundamentally alter it or change it only when there is a fundamental change in business direction. But otherwise, there are minor changes, tweaks that happen continuously. You have a feedback loop that comes back and says, this worked, this didn't work. Your business provides you feedback. So all of those things, it's continually must be changed or adapted.
So another question that I got, and I think it's very relevant given the third poll that we did, it pertains to not having an IT strategy in place, and it says the question is, we don't have an IT strategy, but I'm not convinced that we are missing anything. Are we?
Like I said before, that if you do not have an articulated strategy, and strategy, we should not try to make it grandiose. This is not Shakespearean documentation that's required. Most people just want to understand your direction. And if you've not articulated that direction, that quite frankly, that's the only thing that you've left is people's imagination. What they imagine, what they think, that's driving their behavior, and that to me is a formula for chaos.
Finally, Saurabh, I'm going to just take one more question now, which is what do you think is the difference between IT strategy and IT plan?
For the purposes of this discussion, I'll call them one and the same thing. One determines, how is it that you want to accomplish your objective. The other one lays out the specific steps to accomplishing that objective. So as far as I'm concerned, they're meshed together, and most of the differences are semantic.
Well, I think that does it for the questions now, Saurabh, and thank you so much for your presentation. I also want to once again thank all of you for joining us. You will be receiving a feedback survey by email on this webinar. Your response to the survey is appreciated and of great value to us as we continually strive to improve upon what we deliver to our members. Our next webinar in the series called In Search for IT ROI is on February 27th. You can register for it should you choose to on the events page on CioIndex.com. You will also find a complete list of our upcoming webinars over the next couple of months on our events page. Thank you once again for joining us today. You may exit the webinar by simply clicking on the X on your control panel or choosing File, then Exit. Thank you and have a great day.